Okay, so yeah, let's get started. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to our fifth VU MBA Talk webinar. And this, we have a bit of bulky title, but it will be very interesting. So the title for tonight's webinar is Back to the Roots, How COVID-19 will Change Globalization. My name is Florian Zapkau. I'm an associate professor for international business with the VU, and I'm the program director of a new MBA in international business that will start next year. But this webinar is not about me. It's about the two great guests that I have the honor to introduce to you tonight. And the first one is Anke Dassler. Anke obtained her MBA from ESMT in Berlin. Then she worked for 17 years for KPMG, and she made it even to the partner level, so very high. And then since 2 years, she's working for Evonik Industries, which is a world-leading firm in specialty chemicals, and she is a senior vice president, accounting and global financial services. So I had to look that up because it's a long title, but yeah, Anke, welcome. Thanks for joining. And also we have here Oli Mihalache, who is also an associate professor for international business with the VU. Oli obtained his PhD from the Erasmus University in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Then he worked as an assistant professor at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. And then he joined the VU back again and became an associate professor. Oli does research on the innovativeness of firms and also on offshoring. And he has published in many great journals, among these the Strategic Management Journal, Decision Sciences, and Journal of Management Studies. So welcome, Oli. Thanks for joining.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hi. And so before we stick to the plan that we have for all webinars, so we will give each panelist 5 minutes for a short introduction, and after these introductions we will jump into the discussion. And as I said, welcome to all of you. Great that you are joining, and please feel free to use the chat to ask your questions, and I will transmit these questions to the panelists. And let's see how we are doing on time. If we have some time at the end, then we can also reserve, I don't know, the last 10-15 minutes for some more questions. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so we start with Anke, and Anke joins us from her iPad. So I will share the slides, and then Anke can do the talking.
So why you try to share the slides? Hello, everyone from Germany. Yes, that's at least it's the right slides. Thanks a lot. So can you make
I can make the
presentation mode? Yeah, we will get it. Yeah.
Here we go.
So very happy to be here. Of course, I remember also when I was looking into MBAs, what was driving me. Of course, by then I didn't know that I will work for a company like Evonik one day, but I do now. And before we go, I have one slide what COVID-19 is doing to us, but I have also 2 slides introducing Evonik, because I think not everyone knows what we are doing. So Florian, next slide, please. Not first try. So Evonik is a specialty chemical company, and on this picture you see one of our biggest production sites. It's in Germany, next to Düsseldorf, or very close to Düsseldorf, near Essen. And we are a specialty chemical company. That means we don't produce to end users. We also don't produce the chemicals itself. We produce ingredients for chemicals. So we are in a B2B business. And what's driving us is our purpose here on the left side. We see us as builders of the future to improve people's life today and tomorrow. So everything we're doing is an ingredient for something you probably use. We are 32,000 people worldwide, active in more than 100 markets. And what products we having? It's on the next slide, I think. Yes, to give you an idea what we produce. So we don't produce tires, but we produce chemicals that make tires more fuel efficient. Also, we don't produce mattresses or beds, but for example, we produce the stuff that's inside the foam that basically determines whether your bed is harder or softer. So this kind of very special additives is one of our key products we are producing. And also on the right side, you see tablets. We have a big division. It's called Nutrition and Care. And there in healthcare, we have a lot of applications that basically are used inside tablets to make them more digestible, to make the medicine more, to make it more valuable for your body and so on. So as you can imagine, it's very, very specialized work, very detailed, and that's why you probably also don't know Evonik, but it's probably in many of the stuff you daily use. So next slide, please. Florian. It's not going. Oh, there you go. So here you see the regions we are operating. Our home base is Germany traditionally, and that's why, of course, a lot of stuff is also in Europe. But we have strong operations in the US and also in Asia, especially China. So our sales, when you look at regional distribution, it's almost 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it's fairly distributed. So you can imagine in terms of supply chain, shut borders, protectionism, everything we have to deal. We have to deal in very different ways because each country has their own rules. So it's quite a challenge for us. And COVID was basically just another challenge because all the things that's going on in the world, trade wars, environmental issues, they affect us heavily, especially when you work in the chemical industry. So, and I think there's one more slide. Yes, and here I try to summarize for you a little bit what are current discussions going on, and hopefully we can touch on some of the points then later. So I put it very prominently in the header. COVID-19 is just another challenge to be considered because we do very long-term investments, those chemical plants, which you can also see in my background. When you make a decision to invest there, it's really, really high volume and really, really, we put a lot of thoughts into it, where to invest, what's long-term our strategy, and therefore COVID-19 basically, it hit us, but the discussions we were having under COVID-19, we also had before already. And I put 4 questions here below, which we hopefully can touch on a little bit. How do we ensure that the supply chain can operate and our products produced and delivered to our customers? So you can imagine if you ship one product from one side to the globe to the other side of the globe, and the borders are shut down because of COVID, this was quite challenging. The good thing is in chemical industry, you can replicate quite a bit. If you have the same ingredients, you can replicate the chemicals. So we were doing this on some, we were really creative and pragmatic in some ways and ensured that our production was running during the whole COVID time. Then the second question, investments, where should be the sites of the future? And when more pandemics are coming, environmental issues are come up, where can chemical companies operate at all? The third question, of course, this was where we discussed a lot during COVID, how to ensure that our staff stays healthy. Just to give you an example, the chemical park you see in my background, they have their own firefighters. And for example, if the firefighters would not be able to operate because they were sick, we would have to shut down the whole park. So this would be tremendous impact on our financials. That's why we really ensure that our staff stays healthy. And so far, we had no really major shutdown worldwide. We had 1 or 2 minor ones, but in general, Evonik was operating the whole time. And of course, last not least, that's my specialty also to make sure that the financial flow is going on. We have 3 shared service centers for our accounting and financial services, which were shut down basically from one day to the other. So we had to make sure that invoices are booked, that the money comes in, all the stuff you need basically to operate as a company. So quite some challenges, but as I said, we have to deal with it anyway. We have environmental issues. So for investments especially, it's very important that they are long-term, we can operate there. That's why, those questions were not new. However, in the let's say in the powers COVID came over and the diversity of country measures we had to deal with, if we're operating in 100 countries, it was quite a challenge during the time. But so far, Evonik is managing this very well. And happy to discuss this further with you then.
Great, thanks a lot, Anke. And I So yeah, very interesting. We will come back to many of these points later. I forgot to mention that Anke, next to her impressive career, actually also pursues a PhD with us at the VU. So that's we didn't want to hide that element of your career, Anke.
No problem. I'm not done yet, so it's quite.
No, but you're on a good track there as well. So thanks for the intro, and yeah, let's hand over to Oli, who has also brought some slides and will also give a 5-minute intro about his work and about our topic today. Please, Oli, floor is yours.
Thank you, Florian, and well, thank you also very much for inviting me. It is a very, I think you've brought up a very important topic about what is the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on globalization and how companies engage in international business. I think for me, one of the biggest realizations of the COVID-19 pandemic is that it really made everybody aware how globally interconnected our society is. We really rely on globalization for our normal functioning. All businesses are interconnected and they rely on global supply chains. And it is even companies that don't consider themselves international or don't have international ambitions, they are still severely affected by foreign events. And whereas in the past, I would have to spend some time in my international management class explaining students and convincing students of how globally interconnected everything is, I think the pandemic really made this clear for everyone. And the global connectedness makes today's business environment, it is complex, it is volatile, and it is uncertain. So when something happens in a part of the world, is going to have consequences in other parts of the world. And I mean, after making after making organizations and people aware of the interconnectedness that we rely on, I think it is very important to think of the future and perhaps what are going to be the implications of the pandemic going forward, and what might companies need to change going forward. And for me, I think an important aspect is that companies need to pay a lot of attention to the idea of resilience. And the resilience refers to the capacity to absorb stress, to recover critical functionality, and perform in a changed environment. So resilience doesn't mean that a company is not affected by an event such as the COVID pandemic, but rather that it is quicker than its competitors in recovering and being able to perform optimally in new circumstances. Now, the problem here is that most companies are not designed for resilience, but rather they're designed to maximize financial performance. And most of the management tools that managers have, they are designed for financial management. So we don't really have all the tools, and the thinking is not aimed at resilience. And I think this concept is particularly important for global businesses because international businesses face higher levels of complexity due to having operations in a multitude of environments. So they're exposed to different political, cultural, and legal environments, just like Anke said about Evonik, with operations in over 100 locations, 100 countries. It is a very complex design, complex operation, and they need to pay attention to developments in these political, legal, and cultural areas of many countries. Now, for global businesses to be able to deliver a product or service, they rely on intricate relationships, okay, that are spread across the globe. So this makes them even more susceptible to shocks such as the COVID-19. So the more international the company is, the more exposed it is to external shocks. So I think kind of going forward, and perhaps what I would like to talk more about in today's meeting is about how to build resilience in global organizations. So I'm not going to go into this right now. So maybe I can speak about it a little bit later. But the main point that I would like people to take away from tonight is that companies need to pay more attention to resilience, and that is especially true for companies that are global. So yeah, well, later I think we can go more into these details. I have 5 points, 5 levers that managers can use to make their global organizations more resilient.
Okay, great. Thanks, Oli. Okay.
Yeah, stop sharing.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Cool. Thanks a lot. Yeah, you mentioned a very interesting point actually, and yeah, resilience, and that has been mentioned. I mean, you read it in the popular business press all the time that firms need to be more resilient. Maybe even teams need to be more resilient. Now, a researcher talks even about that. So it has gained some traction in the professional world, in the research world. So Anke, what did you at Evonik? You said how difficult it is. Yeah, if the firefighters cannot come to work, then the whole plant needs to be shut down. So how can you create resilience for such a large firm that is active in so many countries?
Yeah, I think first what we did, especially in COVID, I mean, probably many companies did the same thing, but we built up a, let's say, crisis steering committee, but we also have, and I think it goes back to Oli's point, we also have very local steering committees there. So each site is different. And the shutdowns, the problem was basically the shutdowns was not globally, but country by country, different regulations, country by country. So purely looking at the local perspective makes no sense. However, of course, as a firm, we have to give some local, some global guidance. So we have a global steering committee here, but also we have local site per site, let's say, firefighting teams for the crisis. So I think it's more a network than governance, because you need everyone also from the regions there, and basically go day by day and make sure that basically you adjust and have I think also one thing we did was also we had plans for different scenarios. So if something would shut down in one side of the globe, could we produce it somewhere else? Because our key target was to deliver our customers, to keep delivering our customers, because building in the chemical industries, building up the supply chains after they have been broken is very difficult. That's why it was really important to keep delivering our clients and pay our suppliers.
Okay, and that is the firm level, and I see already in the chat some questions about how this will affect maybe the whole industry. So I saw that question, Xiao. I hope I pronounced that correctly. So we'll save that for later, because we will look in the last part. We will look also a bit of kind of try to look a bit in the future. But for now, let's stay in the present. So okay, the firm, you mix let's say a global team, and you see also how it is regionally. But how is it kind of within your team, Anke? I mean, you're a team leader of I think a couple of hundred people, right? And so how do you do it there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first weeks were really stressful in March, April, because basically every day we had every morning we had a call with my leadership team and basically said, did something happen overnight which we have to deal with today? And in the beginning we had lots of stuff to discuss. Does everyone have VPN? Does internet work in Malaysia? I mean, one thing is our firm, the other one is the internet in the different jurisdictions working, which is completely out of our range. So we were ready. For example, we have one shared service center in Malaysia with over 100 people. we were ready basically to take over in other shared service centers to book the invoices. So we had plan B for the worst case, and we were steering every day. Of course, now it's running. We have things in place. We know that obviously we have internet that's working also in other parts of the world, so it's working well. But in the beginning, we were having daily emergency calls, and just as a leader, you have to go day by day and make decisions day by day.
Yeah. Oli, what can you add from a, let's say, from a research perspective? So is that typical what happened in Anke's firm, or is it what happened there?
Well, I think I just want to share some statistics from I think from McKinsey survey, because I think it fits very nicely with what Anke was saying. So one challenge when you're operating in so many countries and you get a shock like the COVID pandemic is that people in different locations were going to be affected by differently in objective ways. They cannot get out of the house, they cannot buy groceries, but also culturally there's going to be predispositions to interpret this event differently. So there are going to be differences in the welfare of your teams around the world. So I just wanted to share this the results of this survey, because I think it quite nicely shows these differences on how your workforce around the globe is affected by this pandemic. So here we can see that when asked to what extent employees around the world were feeling healthy and safe on work site, workplace, how connected they were about their mental health. We can see that across the geographies, there are clear differences. So I think for a manager like Anke, this creates a lot of challenges in how to ensure that, well, the people you work with are in an optimal place mentally and physically in order to be able to do their job. And I think this also has to do with the concept of resilience and how can you make your organization more resilient. Well, I think it really comes down to putting a lot more focus on the people, because it will require people to work more flexibly in situations like this, to cover for one another, to take on additional tasks. So it makes a lot of sense for organizations to invest in developing their workforce, because that will increase their resilience. And I think perhaps one of the main issues that many organizations have here is that they tend to focus on developing their employees, but their domestic employees. There is this kind of home bias in which they really invest in developing home employees to the detriment of foreign employees. And I think for resilience, you really need to ensure that you are developing your workforce throughout your global footprint.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can also add to this, Oli. I completely agree. And of course, as a very traditional German-based firm, it's really a challenge especially to give people a career perspective outside Germany, because many of the high-paid jobs are, of course, in headquarters or let's say at least Europe-centric. But I completely agree with you. In order to really understand what the effect is of such a crisis in each country, you need these locals to tell you, because you don't know. Exactly. Yeah.
Is that, as a follow-up from my side, is that, Oli, is that more a cultural thing? Because I saw an interesting statistic that you showed, kind of, for example, people in the US, they did not feel safe. So does that relate that kind of, yeah, they see that the numbers are rising, maybe the healthcare system is not able to cope so well? Or is it a cultural thing that kind of people have a built-in resilience? Where does it come from? Can you say that? Or can you do
well, I think it's both. Okay, so I would definitely attribute a lot of these responses to the cultural differences between nations. I mean, living in the Netherlands and also having family in other countries, I can clearly see the different mentality of how serious people take the current situation, the COVID-19, and so I do think it's cultural, but also this cultural is going to influence also the response from the government and the support that people have. So I do think it's a combination, but underlyingly it is the cultural difference.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we saw it also with our PhD students. So we have PhD students from all over the world, and some we had Asian PhD students who basically, when there was the outbreak, basically they left for their home country because they felt more safe at home, even though the cases in the home country much higher at this point. But they were kind of, because in the Netherlands, a bit more, let's say, relaxed or liberal at first with reacting to that outbreak, and some just didn't like that. So I can see that for Anke, it must be really challenging to find the right response across such a diversified supply chain and such a diversified a global firm, basically.
Yeah, and because also I think it was quite unforeseeable what would happen. I mean, to give you an example, from one night to the other, the truck stops in the US shut down I think in Pennsylvania. So the truck drivers that were driving through Pennsylvania from one state in the US to the other couldn't go and take a rest. Which, I mean, even if you have the best business continuity plan in the world, you would never think about such a problem. So now we know, but I'm pretty sure in the next crisis, there will be something completely different. So that's why you have to just stay flexible and go with the flow.
But right. Okay, but let me add up, or let me add, I don't know, add to this. Brings us almost to the second pillar, what we wanted to talk about. So you say, okay, even the best plan, kind of the next crisis will kind of the plan will not work again. So, but one solution that you read about also in the media. And I don't know if there's current research already on this, but what you often read is that people shift their supply chains basically, and they produce more locally. They produce closer to the home base basically. So Anke, can you observe for Evonik a change that you produce more locally, or is it you will stay so diversified as you are?
I mean, when you look at our statistics, we are operating in 100 countries, but we have production site in 26 countries. The rest is research, sales, and this kind of thing. So, I mean, for the chemical industries, you cannot just shift from one place to the other and build up, let's say, financially efficient factories in each country. It's simply not possible. The other side is also supply. You basically need oil or wheat or something else in order to make chemicals. So you have to be supplier for our raw materials there. And also the distribution for chemicals should be possible, because some of the chemicals you can also not really transport. So we already have all these restrictions, and I don't see much change with COVID actually, because even before that we had to look at Asia. You have to be there in the market in order to sell. But I think the business things that are very specific for the chemical industries are much more dominant. So, and you cannot really make a decision just because of one pandemic and change the whole supply chain. It's just simply in our business, I would say it's impossible. For some small productions, yes, but not for the large scale. I mean, this thing you see in the back, it's our biggest chemical park. It's over 100 plants. We have four power, how you call this? Power stations? Oh, how you call it? Yeah. Kraftwerke, yeah. So we have 4 power stations there. You cannot just take it and cut it in pieces and put it, somewhere in the world. It's impossible from operations. Yeah.
Okay, I see. I have one question from the audience, actually. Okay, that goes a bit to the statistics that we have also about the culture. I think the statistics you presented were quite in rather broad blocks. So we're aware of the fact that, for example, the questions here, India and China, they would probably not belong to the same block. So that is kind of. Yeah, that's kind of, consultancies, they always kind of simplify things a lot. So us researchers, we think often more complicated. So yeah, okay. No, that's just a comment. So that it's probably even more differentiated than such a statistic can show, basically. Okay, but okay, so I can see the difficulty basically. So for Evonik, I hear from you, Anke, that kind of it's not Yeah, it's not the goal to say, okay, we only produce in Germany or we only produce in Europe because you need access to ingredients, and if they are not there, you still have to produce all over the world where you find your ingredients. Oli, when we talked about this webinar beforehand, yeah, we talked also that it's also not a shift in the supply chain is not only about, let's say, being very cost effective, but it has also some other repercussions. So what do you think about that?
So I don't think bringing operations back home is a viable option for many organizations, and so I think backshoring or reshoring of operations, it's not something that in the long term is going to make you more resilient. Also because, I mean, there's a few reasons for this. So at the moment, many organizations, they are very intertwined. Their global operations are very intertwined. So it's a deep level of interrelatedness and integration of operations between different locations. So it is not just that you are buying a finished product from somewhere else and you sell it. And especially nowadays, we are talking about this global knowledge networks. So you have different sites around the world that are very specialized. And they don't just contribute with parts, but they contribute with knowledge. So the supplier that provides you parts or the inputs, well, that is a specialized supplier, has a lot of knowledge in those processes. So bringing those processes and doing them at home, it's not going to be very cost efficient. And I think another problem with bringing everything back home, and why it wouldn't really lead to resilience, is that many organizations perceive this as a temporary and isolated event. Reorganizing the global value chains might not be perceived as it might be a too dramatic response to a temporary problem. And if we are talking about building resilience, I think the building resilience would start with kind of shifting companies' mentality to adopt more of a system thinking, understanding what are the interdependencies in the operations, and identifying bottlenecks. Okay? And with those bottlenecks, they can build buffers. Okay, so even if you bring part of your operation back home, well, you may still rely on some inputs from abroad, and if there is a problem with those, your operation will stop. So I think a more effective way of approaching this issue would be to really identify what are the interconnections in your operations, and then what are the bottlenecks, and building buffers for those bottlenecks.
Do you agree, Anke, or is it that we researchers make the world as we like it, and in reality it's very different? So what do you think?
Well, I think in theory, I would agree. You would probably do it. My fear is that as soon as, I mean, you can already see it now in Asia, for example. But basically, business is back to normal, I would say. So I think sitting down now and identify these buffers, exactly as you said, and build cushions, I think none of us is doing it at the moment, because other things become more important and you're rushing to the next thing. I think in theory, I would agree would be the right process, but I think in practice, I think in practice is really difficult for a company to put resources into that kind of exercise, just writing it down. The business continuity plans we were having, of course, as in the chemical plants, you have them. In the back office, we were looking basically where are our business continuity plans. Theoretically we have it, but not on the level you need. So we had to build it from scratch, and I'm pretty sure if going back to normal, you don't take the time, let's say every month or every year, and look at it and say, is it still valuable? Because other things on the agenda just come up, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that as kind of also with to business planning in general, is always the risk that you overplan, and then it's of course costly, and the situation will never arise. But of course, if you haven't planned at all, then yeah, it's also very costly because you have no contingency plan. So probably somewhere in there is kind of the optimum amount of planning. But Oli, you mentioned something we talked about before, kind of that yeah, when firms shift their supply chains and move them back or do not move them back, but often it's a kind of a short-term profit orientation. But you always say that kind of yeah, firms need to build capabilities, so what's the trade-off there between short-term profit and building capabilities?
So I mean, again, if we're kind of going back to this idea of resilience, and it's the point Anke was making. Many times, the way we think about organizations, we are thinking and we are focusing on short-term results. But if we would want to build more resilience, then there needs to be a mentality shift towards a more long-term, okay? Because to build more resilient organizations, you need to make different investment decisions, different organizational decisions, different developmental decisions for your employees, because pretty much by definition, resilience is focused on the long term, okay? Whereas our performance measures are focused on the short term. So this is why we have this disconnect. And of course, organizations need to really make up their own decisions regarding what is the comfort level and how they can balance these two requirements. Because in the end, they're both important, right? You need to focus on short-term profitability, but also long-term viability and building capabilities for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I mean, and Evonik as a firm is listed on the stock exchange, so probably you need to produce a quarterly earnings report, and the investors wait for it. So I think it's a difficult trade-off probably for you between the short-term profitability and kind of thinking long-term about this.
Yeah, but by definition, we have to think long-term. Huh? If we spend, let's say, 200, 300 million euros in one plant, you have to be sure that this is running and operating long-term. So that's why, and also we're just building a new power plant also in our park here in Marl. So those are really long-term investments that have to be also not only profitable but relevant and basically operatable in the future, right? I mean, if you're in an area where, let's say, you have water, not enough water, then and the environmental reports show that it become even worse with climate change. You cannot be sure that you still operate in 20 years in that area, and that's why I think. In general, I would agree to what Oli said, but I would say in the chemical industry, it's quite long-termish. We are thinking ahead in our investments.
But do you have? I mean, that's really interesting. Do you have? Because I can see the need for that kind of make this long-term planning. So do you have a unit somewhere within Evonik that kind of thinks, okay, how? And that brings us a bit to the topic, kind of when we look into that magic crystal glass bowl that shows us the future. So is there a unit within Evonik that kind of thinks long-term and says, okay, how will the chemical industry look like in 10 years? People drive electric cars. Do they still need, I don't know, these tires that you produce now for traditional cars? So is there a unit that thinks of this?
Yeah, we have a corporate foresight unit, and I was just looking here at my. I was pulling up their recent report. First, there's a great YouTube video you can check. I don't know exactly the name, but it's, let's say, 4 scenarios for the chemical industry. It's made by Evonik. It came out, I think, last year. It's publicly available, so you can look at it. And I'm looking at our recent corporate foresight report. It's 330 pages, and it goes by region. So, and it goes basically to our main business lines by region. So that's why this question regarding where's the medical industry is going, it depends where and depends what. I mean, what I can see is that the technology with the recent vaccine for COVID-19, the new RNA-based technology, I think they will have a push for sure. But in general, I think you have to look very specific to answer that question. And that's why this report is quite long. It goes by region, even by sub-region, because it depends very much on the legislation. It depends very much on the industry that is there. That's why we're having this team who's taking care of that.
Okay. And can you, I don't know, share a bit what they would say in terms of, the international side of the business would look like in
well, I have to say COVID is not included yet. So it was published in the beginning of this year. And of course, they talk a lot about these trade wars, that you have to be very close also to government, make sure that you basically serve the markets there, but also obey long-term, where's the government's going? Is it more protectionism? Is it more open? So that's why they go very, very deep, basically there. That's why it's really difficult to say, because I mean, as a researcher, you have to give very specific answers to questions, and this report is is basically dealing with all of it. Yeah.
But is that available, the report, or is that's internal? But this YouTube video,
the video is really interesting because they give 4 or 5 scenarios, because it depends basically, do we have more protectionism? Is, for example, Asia getting, or let's say China getting stronger? How is the US? Are we basically pushing climate change regulation? Are we pushing for the Paris Treaty? Those are basically the scenarios, and then they come up with certain outcomes. So that's why it really depends also where the world's going and what decisions we are as a society are making. And then you can basically say what the business is doing. So it's publicly available. Maybe, I don't know if it's possible I can send you the link. So maybe you can post it in the chat if you want.
Yeah, I can do that. I'm joining from an iPad, so we hope that not everything will crash. If so, sending a link is a bit more difficult than you might expect. So, but if it's possible, I'm happy to push it in the in the chat. And I see in the chat that there's a question from Siska, and it goes to Oli actually. So it goes back to kind of a bit of that. Yeah, there's a bit of contradiction between saying that firms should look long term to be more resilient. Anke says, okay, well, we have to. Well, on the one hand, we have to also kind of focus on investors and have to make day-to-day decisions. But of course, if you have a plan, then you decide very, very long term, basically. So it's a kind of a contradiction. Oli, can you help Siska a bit to remove that contradiction he has?
Well, it is a contradiction, and that's why it's an issue. And I mean, companies have to find ways in order to kind of satisfy both the short-term requirements, but also at the same time building capabilities that allow them to be resilient to particular shocks like this one. But I think there are also some ways in which you can build resilience that don't go against, let's say, short-term financial needs. And I think when we put a title for this talk, kind of going back to the basics, my immediate thinking was not kind of bringing operations back home, but rather focusing on the people, okay, and investing in the people, because in this kind of situation, global organizations have the privilege, have the advantage of leveraging their diversity. They can, if they start working early on building relationships between their global operations from different locations, in times of need, they can leverage those relationships to take advantage of the diversity that they have. This simply can mean if there is a problem in one country, people cannot get to work or are not in a mental state optimal for performing their duties, colleagues in another location can take over some of their tasks, can try to provide support. For instance, I was talking to a country manager from a Dutch company that sells like toilets, bathtubs, showers, and so forth. And he was saying, well, usually I get all the pricing done by my team in Austria. Okay? Now I'm responsible for sales in Eastern Europe. Well, there were some problems with staffing there. Now I have to do it myself, and I had to learn kind of these skills. So this kind of flexibility, I think it's very important. And but companies need to start early on in investing in people and building the relationships between their different sites.
Okay, wait a second. I just was about to post the link for the video. Okay, I hope that was the right one that I found. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Oli. Anke, when you hear what Oli has said, actually, so investing in the people, so that is where you go actually back. But I know you're a leader of a very large team. So do you? Yeah, I don't know. Have you taken any measures, kind of, to consider that resilience aspect a bit more? Or will you do in the future?
I mean, for the people, I mean, what we're having, of course, because we noticed that people get really stressed with this COVID situation. And not only because you might have kids at home, you need to do homeschooling. It's also when you're single, for example, sit at home in home office. So the problems are very, very difficult and specific depending on your situation. What we have is we have learning nuggets and learning hours on resilience. You can do weekly, let's say, virtual yoga here in our, so we have offers. However, there's not one fits all. So that's why we have offers. I mean, me and my team, we do a once a week, we do a coffee break where I'm asking globally everyone, how are they doing? Any specific issues coming up? And we have some expatriates who are currently considering coming home because they say sitting in home office in Malaysia for 8 weeks, having the kids at home, I can also sit in Germany. Because if you're an expat, and we have lots of expats in the globe, it's quite difficult time. You don't know anyone probably in the country, or not many people, and you are locked down in a small apartment. So which is not your home. You don't have family to take care of your kids, and so on and so on. So that's why I think it can become very difficult for people. That's why we are very conscious that we're very close and make sure that they are okay.
Yeah. I think that's very good to hear, and very important indeed. We saw that also with our students. Actually, how difficult it was for some of them, especially the ones who joined us from different continents, basically. So then it's if you do not have the social network at home, it makes it very difficult. And then also, it's difficult to handle. And speaking of, so I have a mention in the chat. So Sonia from India says thank you for the insights. Yeah, welcome, Sonia. So happy that you join us from India. And also here's some Chinese names in the chat. So glad that so many people are joining and asking questions. So I wait a second before I ask more questions. So are there questions from the audience members? So we have around about 10 minutes left in our webinar. I know that the important announcement of the Dutch government is coming up. So we have a bit of the Corona theme night. So first us talking about how it impacts globalization and resilience and all of that. And then your government will speak to you and for the Dutch audience members. So are there any questions from your side? Please post them in the chat, and then I can transmit to our panelists. Okay, let me see for a second. Yeah, we talked about the short-term, long-term. We talked about the graph. We had a question from the beginning, actually. So Oli and Anke, what do you think are the changes of globalization in medical industry? Okay, this is now very industry specific. I start with Anke because they have a team who looks at the future developments, but maybe it's too specific, then just say so.
Well, as I said, I mean, maybe you can really have a look at the video because it really explains, and it really depends where we're going as a global community, I would say. And I think if one thing became clear during COVID, that we are a global community. If we make a decision on one part of the globe, it affects others. So. And that's why I think it's 4 or 5 scenarios they come up with. And I think one is we work closer together. The second is we don't work together. So I would hope for a scenario where people would work closer together and we solve issues like climate change more as a global community. But if this happens, it depends on a lot of things. And I think the video makes it really clear, to be honest. So unfortunately, there's not a simple answer.
Okay, but Anke, do not send our audience to the video right away. So
okay.
Stay with us for some more minutes.
In 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you can check it out.
No. Afterwards, it's for okay if you watch the video. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, Oli, what? From your perspective, probably we are both IB researchers, right? So kind of we believe in open borders and in trade, or do you see it somewhat differently in terms of solving the grand challenges?
No, I mean, I personally think it's very difficult these days to kind of dial down globalization, because it's not a shallow globalization anymore like it was in the 19th or early 20th century. Now it's a lot deeper, the globalization, and the different. I mean, to be able to deliver a product or a service, you really are dependent on this knowledge in your subsidiaries abroad. And those subsidiaries themselves were dependent on knowledge in other parts of the world, in the local environment, but also in other parts of the world. So this whole distinction between local and global is becoming a little bit problematic because of the higher levels of integration. I think, especially when we talk about knowledge industries like the medical industries, kind of looking forward, looking ahead, what I would expect increasing levels of interdependence, because to come up with new solutions, you are dependent on knowledge bits from many other locations. And also because in the medical sector, you have to invest a lot of money in research and development, and these are oftentimes very uncertain results. Well, you need global scale in order to make up for this high investments. So as far as at least medical industry is going, what I would expect to see increasing levels of globalization and increasing levels of interdependence between the foreign sites of medical of medical research and medical facilities.
Oh yeah, sorry, Anke, please.
Can I add one thing? Because actually, I think what we also observe is in areas where our sales are really low. One thing we developed, let's say since 5 years probably, is to build a lab there, a research lab, and make research there with the customers, potential customers. And it comes back to what Oli is saying. And since then, you can see that the sales are increasing, because you have to find solutions for the locals there, not only the medical but also the chemical industry. And therefore, it's for us doing research with our potential customers is really a booster for sales. So that's why I would agree that we need to go more local, and that means then more global, and work more together with let's say researchers, but also with potential customers, to really find the solutions that are fitting for the market. And we can really see this interlink in our operations.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the development of the first vaccine is actually a very good example, I think, to what Oli has said, basically. So as much as Trump is often against kind of globalization and creating trade barriers, it was then the cooperation of a German biotech firm and Pfizer, so a large US biotech firm, health company, who introduced the first vaccine that is being distributed today in the UK, actually, so in another country. So kind of that shows that kind of that globalization, I think, can be more of a part of the solution, not so much being part of the problem. I have here an interesting, or several questions actually from Charlotte. So let me see. So Charlotte, I hope, Charlotte, I say Charlotte fears that will globalization not stop, seeing how vulnerable the supply chains are? Well, I think Oli has already said that kind of he does not think that globalization will stop. Anke, what do you see?
I also do not see it that it will stop. It's simply impossible to stop it. I mean, what's the opposite of globalization? That each country has their own companies and they only work in their own country. I in no scenario I see this happen. It's already too much related, as Oli was saying, to many things there, and for us, especially with all the very complicated supply chain we are having, I do not see globalization stop. I see it becoming more difficult, but it also was before more difficult because of trade wars, environmental issues, and this kind of things. So you have to take more caution where you invest and what you invest and how you keep this long term. But stopping is not an option.
Okay.
Well, I think the COVID-19 pandemic gave us a little bit of taste of what the world would be like without globalization. Okay? We got a little taster, and I don't think we liked it.
Oh no, sorry.
I mean, I think decreasing globalization would come with significant social costs that we may not be willing to pay.
Yeah, I can say that too. I interrupted for a second because Charlotte had some more questions. Let's see, what can we say here? The flying industry. Oh yeah, that's maybe an interesting one that probably also bothers me personally, kind of. Of course we all miss travel, but of course we also know that there's kind of business travel that is not strictly necessary and that is not great for the environment. So Anke, can you already say, I know, is there a change in the policies?
Yeah.
Do you have short-term flights from Düsseldorf to Frankfurt anymore, or kind of do you do things differently a bit?
Okay, if there's one good thing about COVID is people notice that you can also, for some issues, talk on the phone. Okay, so I definitely can see this. So our travel cost dropped dramatically, but also we are now working on a policy that the travel is limited. Going for 2 hours from Germany to somewhere in the world for a meeting and return makes no sense at all. However, there will be still meetings, of course, because we all miss the interaction, creativity. We can already see it in the policy, and I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. And Oli, I know you have family abroad, so probably you will also want to travel again. But yeah.
Well, I want to travel again, of course, but I think, I mean, if we think in terms of where we're heading, I think kind of really this showed that Zoom meetings can be quite efficient, and maybe companies have to think twice before actually booking a flight rather than having a video chat. Now, I'm wondering whether this is going to have kind of long-term impact or it's just going to be a dip, and then we will go back. I don't know. A lot of, for instance, sales directors, like regional sales directors, say, well, yeah, we can do it like this. It works, but I want to get back in the field. So I think it all will also depend on the industry and the company
and the job. Yeah, I mean, sales. We also had a good example. I have one colleague he's heading a business line, and he was missing his customers. I think it was China or Thailand. I'm not sure. He was missing his customers so much. He went 2 weeks into quarantine and then visited his customer. So that's quite customer centric.
That's the spirit actually. So no.
Yeah.
Okay. I see that we're approaching 6:30, so almost the hour that we had planned for the session went over in a heartbeat. And yeah, thanks Anke, thanks Oli, thanks so much for your insights. I think we could probably go on for 2-3 more hours and kind of see how the world will be changing or not. I think what we learned is that it is a bit more differentiated and difficult. So probably the easy solutions that you see somewhere on LinkedIn that people know how the future look like. I think that is often not the case. So really be a critical thinker and how the world could look like maybe, and how everything develops. In closing, thank you Anke, thank you Oli for joining us tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you also to the audience. Before I leave you into the night, I show you also a quick goodbye slide from my computer. Give me a second. So yeah, before I leave you into the night, or before I leave you basically over to YouTube to watch Anke's video, the Evonik video, which I can recommend. I just want to remind you that we have actually if my PowerPoint is 3 new MBA programs that will start next year and in March. So 2 of them, the MBA in International Business and the Executive MBA Leading with Purpose. Both programs will start in March 21. And actually, both programs will also kind of address many of these challenges and deal with all these challenges that you working in firms, in global firms, face today. And also what I said about being a critical thinker and becoming a thought leader. So that is really ingrained in these MBA programs. And then there will be another MBA program starting presumably in September 21. That is then more on finance. So the International Executive MBA in Finance and Control. And if you want to know more about the MBA programs, please feel free to contact us. We have interesting scholarships available. Contact us for a one-on-one meeting and for more information. So reach out, join our LinkedIn page. And the LinkedIn page will, of course, also inform you about upcoming webinars. The next one is in January, where we have very nice guests like today and an interesting topic. So feel free to reach out, stay in contact with us. There was a question about the Oli's statistics. So I think just write me or Oli an email. You find us both on the WU website. Feel free to reach out. You find Anke on LinkedIn if you want to connect. Thanks for joining. Thanks again, Anke and Oli, and have everybody a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.